Hi, this is Evelyn of the Modern Needle, and I am back with part 2 of the Tetris mitered corner blanket. And let's talk about some of the next steps that happens once you finish the first row of mitered squares, whether you knit them in a row, like going this way, or you knit them going upwards or from right to left, left to right. It doesn't actually matter how you knit them, or if you knit them like mine, in a Tetris fashion where the boxes are different sizes and in different arrangements. That doesn't matter. You are going to come up with where you need to knit on two sides, where you don't have to cast on anything and you knit on two sides. So again, mine is the Tetris style blanket, and I have enough stitches here to insert a big block, like the blocks that I had shown yesterday and the one that is adjacent to here. I don't want to move everything because I think I'll jiggle the whole camera bit, which I don't want to do for you right now. So hopefully you watched the first video of where I showed you how to knit this little knot here on the side and how easy it is to pick up all of these stitches with a smaller needle. And I do recommend a smaller needle. The choice is always up to you. However, if you use a bigger one, or the same needle actually that you're knitting with, it is very easy to stretch out this little knotted edge. After all, they're only wraps from the front and back that we are actually taking advantage of. And once you stretch them out a little bit, they borrow yarn from the sidebars in here that connect them to the next stitch. They bugger up the tension a little bit, and often this loop doesn't spring back. So do use a smaller needle, or of course knit them on the tip of your needle, which is a bit thinner, until you push the stitch off in order not to stretch this out. Sorry about that. These stitches here get knitted through the back loop so that they look open, so that your transition is actually very neat and clean, like here. So let's deal with the other side of the stitches. Well, let me check if I have the 22, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 19. I do need one more. Let me see. I'll pick up this one here. And this is actually just the loop of the back stitch, and I will clean that up. So I will knit this as a loop. And then once I knit across here, once I finished my first row and the pickup and the first row, I will clean up this thread. I don't like knitting them in as I clean it up, because you can see it on the other side, and because we have different colors, I don't necessarily want that. So I'll just knit it, I'll weave it in after my first row, and I will show you how I do that. So now I have counted over my 20 stitches from this side here, and I secured the hole with a bobby pin so I don't lose it. And you can really see easy on this backwards loop cast on edge where we're putting the needle to pick up the new stitches. So let's give it a go here. If after you have counted and you have too many stitches on this side here with the tail end, you can just release them. That is not an issue here. So let's go in and just attach the new yarn. So it is 1. I try not to shake the camera too much for you. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. I need 21, and I'll take my last stitch out of this cross stitch here because I don't want to have a hole in it. I'll just twist it as you, sorry, I will twist that last stitch. So I knit it through the back loop so that it tightens up a little bit. So I actually have 2 stitches out of coming out of that same hole here. And I do have 2 stitches too many. So I will just release 1, 2. I don't know what I counted here, to be honest. I thought I had it right, but maybe not. So pull this guy down here. This side here has just been picked up. It has not been knitted. This side here with the attached yarn has been knitted, and the cast on is actually row number 1, so that we get a clean transition. As we talked in the last video, it shows the bumps on the back. So I need a stitch marker to denote the middle here. So this is the thing about these close-up shots. Not only do I not want to bump the camera, but I don't really have tons of space here to maneuver. So I knit these through the back loop, as I had said before. The first one is loose because it's just the tail, so we'll secure that. So 1, 2, 3. This is a bit better. 4, 5, 6. And you can see that I use my fingers as tools all the time. They actually help me present this stitch correctly. Oops. Normally I wouldn't really pull on a stitch like this because I do not want to stretch them out, but because the needle is longer at the at this side of the edge, and I have the camera in between. Sorry, I really have a hard time seeing what's going on. You can see it, but me not so much. So okay. And I will just slip the last one as per normal with the yarn in the back. I'll remove this needle here, and now I have my, sorry, I have all of my stitches here. It's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. Correct. So now I can start knitting, and I'll knit the 2 together, etc. And I will show you that. I'll do 1 or 2 rows with you and then show you how I clean up the threads in the back. Just need to unwind enough yarn here to get me going so I don't juggle everything about. Okay. And forgive me if I bump into the camera. I try not to do that because I'm kind of crossing things here. Okay, so this is a very lovely yarn actually to be working with. When I was the yarn wizard at Michael's for the Red Heart pilot program, they often would have yarns on sale, and because I was there every Saturday, of course I had to buy. How can you not buy yarn that's really pretty and on sale? But it's rather bright, so I had thought maybe for a garment it'll be too bright for me, and we don't have any babies in the family. My cousin in Germany has a 2-year-old granddaughter, but that I do like knitting for. I mean, it's a little girl. How can you not? Okay, so I am at the end of the first row, and I slip this with the yarn in back. So this here will have to stay until the next time I cross over, and I'm ready here to transition into the new block. Very pretty. So I'll have another little one here, and then I can put a big block on top of this if I want to, because that side is open. I'm not attaching it onto the three sides, just the two. So as promised, I will show you how I clean up these yarn tails, and hopefully I do have a needle up in here, which I do not, so pardon me just for 1 second. Okay. So here, I've already cleaned up this yellow one here, and I leave the little tiny tufts, like just little bits, hanging out until I'm completely finished with the blanket, just in case it stretches or whatever. Then I don't want it to work itself to the front. There we go. Very sorry about this shaking camera here. So I'm going to, the bump of the pearl ridge goes this way, so I'm just going to follow the bumps, and it goes up here. So it's almost like a mattress stitch in reverse. The bump comes across here and goes back into the same hole. And I'll just follow it. The bump goes across here, and I go back into this hole. So it'll be clean from the front as well as the back. And because I'm weaving it in and out, the chances of it wiggling anywhere are pretty minimal. So here I'm going to go up a row and maybe one more to follow this bump along here, if you can see that, just so that it's back and forth, and it comes out this way here, and this bump moves up this way, and you can pull on that a little bit. There we go. Now it is all cleaned up. You can't really see that I cleaned up this yarn here. I'll give it a tinier tail. And let's turn it to the front. You can also not see that I've woven in, well, let's give you a prettier view of where we are here. So I have woven in the yarn here, and you cannot tell that that is woven in. So I hope that helped you a little bit in this transition of block 2. And I believe I'll have an additional video on troubleshooting the blocks. What happens, well, I can talk about that here actually for a minute. What happens if you're talking and you're knitting, or you're, I don't know, sitting at the ball game for the kids, or whatever you're doing, or you're watching TV, or you take your eye off the ball for a minute, and all of a sudden your stitches are not even. As you go up, you notice that in the row 2 of your decreases, you don't have the same amount of stitches on the one side. If it is only one stitch, you have a couple of options. If it's one stitch that you're off on the one side, You either will knit 2 times together on the front row or the back row, whichever row you're on. You're going to knit before and after the marker, you knit 2 together. So to get rid of that 1 extra stitch and to center your miter back in the middle. If you're a couple of stitches off, and that has happened to me before as well, and I don't really know how it happens, but it does happen, doesn't really matter. The stitches are not super huge of where you're going to have days of work if you need to think back. If you have more than 1 stitch that you're off, I would probably tink that back or frog it back or whatever you want to say, or rip it back, because the miter will have a jog in it if it's more than 1. So you can either, if it's 1, you can knit 2 together on either side of the marker, or the one side that you're trying to catch up to, omit the decrease and just knit it through, and then in the next row you do your regular decrease, and that pull of the decreases is strong enough that it'll still pull it in, and you can't actually tell in the miter after that you had a minor blip in there. Let's say it does disrupt this line here. Once you have 50 squares in there, you wouldn't be able to tell. So if it's 1 stitch, I wouldn't worry about it. If it's more than 1 stitch, I would probably take it back. And that's all there is to it. If you don't mind, you can kind of fudge it. Like when I had cast on too many stitches on this side, because I started off on this side here going in, I just undid those loops, and nobody is the wiser. Like, the stitches belong to this bit over here, or if you're 1 stitch short, just borrow it or use it from somewhere. It actually doesn't matter. That makes just such a gorgeous ridge. And you can see from the cast on to the knotted pickup, both sides are really quite pretty and quite elastic. So if you knit things on, you always knit them on with your own tension. When you have to sew them in, your sewing tension is not the same as your knitting tension, so you might be off somewhere in there tension wise. That's why I like knitting in. Plus, I really don't like the sewing in. I think you have to be quite good, and if you don't have to, why would you want to? Now, if you look at this edge here, if you were to imagine that this here is a cardigan, you can definitely use this knotted edge and pick up your cardigan stitches this way. Or if you have a sock flap, you can definitely pick up your stitches this way and then go on knitting. You can knit these stitches through the front loop, or you can knit them through the back loop. If you knit them through the front loop, they twist, and if you knit them through the back loop, they're open. See which works, especially for socks. And be careful that you don't stretch out this stitch here. Once it's knitted across, not a problem. It won't stretch out. It'll just be as beautiful as you see here. But once it's stretched out a little bit, sometimes it doesn't come back because it just borrows borrows yarn from the other side. So I hope I taught you something new, and I encourage you to experiment with different ways of, you could pick up in between the bumps as well, and those pickups are also quite clean. I don't think they look as pretty as when you pick it up out of the knot, but the chance of stretching it is much less. And if you were to pick up in between the bumps, you just pick up the one strand between the bumps. You can also pick up both strands between the bumps if this is what you want, to make it a lot more secure. Now, I don't know if you ever need such a strong edge for anything, but that is certainly doable. The other thing that I wanted to talk about before I let you go is if you want to insert, that's where I had my sewing needle. If you want to insert lace bumps into here, or eyelets, the eyelets are created very easy by yarn over and knit two together, yarn over, knit two together. If you don't pay attention, if you do the yarn over first or after, it's very easy to pick up an extra stitch because it throws off your count. So if you do a yarn, I do my yarn overs at the beginning, and for myself I gave it 5 rows and I think 5 stitches in. You can put them anywhere you want. You can do them completely symmetrical, or you can do them like I only do them on when I knit to the middle and I do my decrease. I'm done with the eyelets, I knit to the end, and then again when I turn it around I do eyelets to the middle and then knit to the end. You can stack the eyelets on top of one another, then you get this effect if you stack them on top of one another. If you do them like in every row back and forth, and if you want to put 1 row in between, they stack like this. If you put 2 rows in between, they stack like that. So I gave you a little bit of an example on each, but if you do that, yarn over first, 2 together, that is your 2 stitches. So it starts with a yarn over, it finishes with the 2 together. And if you're at the end of the row, you need to stop at the knitting 2 together. And here you can see I stopped at the knitting 2 together and then I knit 2 together for my miter. But there is no additional yarn over because the pattern is 1 yarn over, knit 2 together. Or if you prefer to do the other way, knit 2 together and do a yarn over, then it stops at the yarn over. Just whichever way you start it is the way that you should keep going. So for my brain, I started with a yarn over and I finished with the 2 together. That's 2 stitches. I decrease 1 and I increase 1, 2 stitches. And that's the end of the beginning of the new repeat is yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, and then I do whatever the instructions say. Like I might have to knit 1 or 2 if I want to. If I don't want to get too close to the miter, or I might knit right up to the miter. That is up to you. But keep the 2 stitches together so that you don't accidentally increase in your count. And you can throw that in anywhere at any time. I usually find if I have a really busy yarn, for example, these guys here, I don't need yarn overs because the yarn doesn't look boring or anything. If I have a lot of one color, I might want to throw it in just to give it an added interest, or to give you an added interest while you're knitting them. That is kind of up to you, but you can put them in any time you want, or omit them. There are advanced things of where you can keep 2 stitches in the middle of the miter and then cross them. So your miter would be on this side. You would have 2 stitches in the middle. You would have two yarn markers, and then you can cable those 2 up. You'd have to purl them on the back side to make that actually shine. And for me, that's just an add of fussy, but it can add an interest in here, so you can do whichever way you want. That's what I mean, like experiment with it and leave it in. Even if you don't do any more of those squares, just leave it in so that it becomes a sampler of your work, of how you get better, or how you tried new things, so it actually does become a sample of what it is that you're working on. So anyways, I do hope that I encouraged you to do something a little bit different, or to just knit it regular. I will talk to you soon. I'll make one more video about the borders, where you can either use a border that's half the size or one of your small blocks or one of your wider blocks, or just do an I-cord border and pick it up on the sides, as I showed you here. If you've done any shawl knitting, very often there's an I-cord edge on the side where you pick up these stitches, and you just need to run your needle through it, and then you knit those two together, the last two together. But I will pop back for another video to show you that, and hopefully the Tetris miter corner blanket will be released in the next few weeks, and I'll pop a coupon code in at the video when it is time, and save you a little bit of money if you're interested in buying it on Ravelry. But until then, I wish you happy knitting, and I'll talk to you later.